Chapter 3. This idiotic advice must be from S.A.W. No one else can suggest such a thing. Doesn't he realize that I am still studying? Imama fumed at her sister-in-law. No, it wasn't S.A.W. or any of his family, it was Baba's idea, she replied with composure. Baba's idea? I can't believe it. When I got admission in the medical college, there was no such plan on the horizon. In fact, he used to tell Uncle Azam that I would not be married till the completion of my house job. What's overcome him now? Imama was nonplussed. There must be some pressure, but Mom told me that Baba wants it this way, her sister-in-law explained. Then tell them that I don't want to get married before I've done my house job. Fine, I'll convey your message, but it's best that you talk to Baba yourself, she advised. Her sister-in-law left the room, but Imama was very concerned. This news was so sudden and unexpected that she was jolted by it, not just figuratively but actually. She was hoping to complete her house job and then start her practice. That would make her financially independent and she could go ahead with her plan to marry Jalal, who would also have established himself by then. But this sudden business of her wedding, why had it come up now? S.A.W.'s family have not made any requests, I have spoken to them myself, Hashim calmly explained. Imama was in his room, she was insistent to know what was going on. You've already spoken to them, without even asking me, Baba? How could you do that? Imama couldn't believe it. Her father looked at her seriously. If you remember, Imama, this marriage proposal had been accepted with your consent, he said. An engagement is something else, and marriage is different. You had agreed that there would be no wedding before the house job, she reminded him. Why do you have an objection to the wedding? Don't you like S.A.W.? It's not a question of liking or disliking him. I do not want to get married in the middle of my studies. You know very well that I want to be an eye specialist. If I get married now, then my plans, my dreams will never materialize. Many girls continue with their education after getting married. We have examples in the family. He tried to pacify her, but she interrupted. Those girls must be very smart, very intelligent. I'm not that I can do just one thing at a time. I've spoken to Azam bro and they are coming over to finalize the dates. Hashim Mubin's tone was firm. You are wasting all my efforts, she protested. If this is what you wanted, then you shouldn't have made any promises. Things were different then, the situation is different now, she interrupted him again. Why? What has changed now that you should treat me so? I assure you that S.A.W. will cooperate fully in letting you complete your education, he will not stop you in any way, Hashim tried to reassure her. Baba, it's not S.A.W.'s cooperation but yours that I need, she pleaded. Please let me complete my studies. Imama, stop being obstinate, I am going to do what I have decided, he said firmly, ignoring her pleas. You've been engaged for 4 years and that's a long time. What if they decide to break off the engagement? Then let them do it. They can call it off now, why wait till tomorrow? After all, it's not the end of the world. Hashim was shocked and angry. Have you any idea what it means? The humiliation, what will people say? What humiliation? It'll be their decision, not our fault. Nothing's going to happen, believe me, tongues will wag for a few days and then it'll all be forgotten. Baba, you are worrying unnecessarily, she said with nonchalance, trying to persuade her father. You must be out of your mind, talking such nonsense. Now please leave, Hashim Mubin said sharply, looking at her with disapproval. Imama left, feeling wretched, she could hardly sleep that night. The next day she went back to Lahore. Her father had not spoken to her again in this regard, and she tried to put the matter out of her mind. She had to study for the forthcoming exams. Her father had not dismissed this conversation, though. He was a very cautious person. He had become worried about Imama when the school incident involving Tarim had taken place. It was not so serious, but to play safe he had Imama's betrothal to S.A.W. confirmed. He believed that the development of a new relationship would divert Imama's thoughts from her doubts about her faith, and he was right. Imama began to show more interest in S.A.W. and also to participate in the religious activities of their faith. But what Wasim had revealed to him shook his very being. He could not gauge to what extent Imama had explored Islam, but he could see that there was a distinct change in her beliefs and views. This was a cause of concern not just for him but for their entire family. He wanted her to be well educated like his older daughters, and more so because she would be married into a family that prided itself on its education. S.A.W himself wanted Imama to be well qualified. Hashim Mubin could not cut short Imama's studies till the wedding, much as he wanted to, without having to explain the rationale behind such a decision. He'd rather they did not know. They would find it hard to accept Imama's doubts and queries about their faith, and her married life with S.A.W would be unhappy. On one hand, he strictly forbade his family members from any discussion on this topic and, on the other, he pleaded with Imama to let good sense prevail. Imama was so careful about her presence at Sabiha's lectures and her meetings with Jalal that these matters did not come to the notice of her family. Secrecy could be maintained also because Imama had also kept Javeria and Rabia in the dark, otherwise rumors would have floated around and reached Hashim Mubin's ears. He was satisfied on that score, but the subtle change in Imama's attitude bothered him, and the only solution that he could come up with was to marry her off. He thought it would relieve him of her responsibility, so he took this abrupt decision. "Jalal, my parents have decided on my wedding, to S.A.W, she revealed. He was the first person she met when she got back to Lahore. But they were going to let you finish your house job. That's what they'd said, but now they say I can complete my studies after marriage. S.A.W will find a place to live in Lahore so that I can study." Jalal could fathom her distress by looking at her. "There's no way that I can marry S.A.W. "Then come clean with them, Imama, tell them you want to marry me, not S.A.W, he said decisively. "You have no idea how they'll react, I'll have to tell them everything." She thought for a moment and said, "Jalal, ask your parents to talk to mine. Tell them about me. If my parents pressurize me, I'll have to leave home and I'll need your help." Jalal agreed. He reassured her that they would understand and accept his decision. For the first time, a faint smile arose on her face. She was busy with the examinations for the next few weeks and did not have the chance to meet Jalal. The day the examinations ended, Wasim turned up in Lahore to take her home. He had caught her by surprise. "Wasim, I can't go home today. My papers have just finished and I have some work to wind up," she said. "I'm here till tomorrow, I'm staying with a friend, so you can do whatever you have to and then come along," he replied, closing her last option. Imama agreed half-heartedly. "You'd better pack up all your stuff," he called as he was leaving. "You'll be spending all the holidays at home." She nodded, but she had no intention of packing all her belongings or of spending the entire vacations in Islamabad. She planned to return to Lahore after a few days, but she was mistaken. She was with her family around the dinner table when her father asked, "How did your papers go?" "Very well, as usual," she replied, helping herself to some rice. "Good. At least there's no more tension about exams. Now you can start your shopping tomorrow," he said. Imama was startled. "What shopping?" "First go to the jeweler's and then for furniture. The rest of the preparations can follow at your pace." Instead of replying to Imama's question, Hashim Mubin addressed his wife. "But why, Baba?" Imama asked again. "Didn't your mother tell you that we have fixed the wedding date?" The spoon in her hand fell onto her plate and the color drained from her face. "My wedding?" She looked at her parents uncertainly. They could not grasp the situation. "How can you do this, without asking me?" She stared wildly. "We spoke to you about this the last time you were here." Hashim Mubin's tone was somber. "I had refused." I do not care about your refusal. I have already discussed this with S.A.W's family," he angrily rebuked her. There was silence at the table as they ceased to eat. Imama stood up suddenly. "I'm sorry, Baba, I can't marry S.A.W now. You fixed the wedding date, so you'll have to tell them to postpone it. Or else I'll talk to them myself." Hashim Mubin was about to explode with fury. "You'll marry S.A.W and on the day I have decided," he shouted. "It's not fair." Imama was almost in tears. "So now you're going to tell me what's fair and what's not, is that so?" He was furious. Why are you forcing me when I told you I don't want to get married now? Imama was crying. Because I have the right to do so. He screamed at her. She did not reply. Clenching his teeth and blazing with anger, he walked out of the room. Please sit down and have your dinner. Salma Mubin went after Hashim. I'll talk to her. Don't get so worked up, she's just being emotional. As soon as her mother left the room, Imama turned on Wasim. Get out. Get away from here, she screamed, shoving him away. Why? What have I done? He moved back. You lied and brought me here by deceit. If I'd known about this in Lahore, I'd never have come back with you to Islamabad. I did what Baba told me to, he forbade me to tell you why you were coming home. I was just following his orders. Wasim tried to clear himself. Then go and sit with him. What business do you have here? Imama could hardly contain her temper. Wasim left without saying a word. After coming into her room, Imama sat down on her bed. The earth had shifted beneath her feet. She had never imagined her family could do this to her, be so rigidly conservative in their views. She still could not believe this was happening to her. Her heart began to sink. I have to face this situation. I cannot give up. I must contact Jalal somehow, as soon as possible. He must have spoken to his parents. I'll find some way out by talking it over with him, she thought as she restlessly paced her room. After midnight she came out to call Jalal. She knew her parents and siblings would have retired for the night. She dialed Jalal's number. The phone kept ringing without response. She tried several times for the next half hour but to no avail. She couldn't call Javeria or Rabia as they were in the hostel. Then, Imama tried Sabiha's number. Her father answered and told her that Sabiha had gone to Peshawar with her mother for a family wedding. He said he'd be leaving the next day. Peshawar? Imama became tense. If there's a message for Sabiha, I can tell her, he offered. No, thank you, uncle, she said softly. What could she possibly tell him? She hung up. Her heart plunged into despair at the thought of not being able to contact Jalal. She dialed his number again, but someone took the receiver away from her. It was her father. Who are you calling? His tone was very composed. A friend, she replied, without looking at him. She could not look him in the eye and lie. I'll dial the number for you, he said, and pressing the redial key, held the receiver to his ear. Imama paled as she watched him. He put the receiver back after a while. Obviously, there was no response. Who's this friend that you were calling at this hour? He asked sternly. Zainab, she said, as it was Zainab's number on the CLI window. She did not want her father to have any doubts about Zainab that would lead him to Jalal. What for? I had to give her a message for Javeria, she said with some hesitation. Tell me what it is, I'll deliver the message personally. Imama, tell me honestly, are you interested in someone else? He asked without any fuss. She looked at him for a while, then said, yes. Hashim Mubin was stunned. He repeated his words and Imama nodded in acceptance. Impulsively, he slapped her across her face. That's just what I feared. Imama, lost in thought, her hand still on her cheek, looked at him. It was the first time in her life that he had hit her, his favorite child. She could not believe it. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. You will not be allowed to marry anyone else except S.A.W. Even if you are interested in someone else, you have to forget him, now. Never, never, never will I let you get married anywhere else. Now get back to your room, and if I see you near the telephone again, I'll break your legs. He was trembling with rage. She returned to her room without a word and flinging herself on her bed, burst into tears. She could not get over her father's violent reaction. After crying a long time, she got up and, mindlessly, began to look out of the sealed glass window panes. Beneath was the garden of her own home and its lawns. Her glance fell across the wall at Salaar's house. His room was on the ground floor. She could see some movement there and gauged that it must be Salaar. It hit her like a flash. He could help her. If she confided in him and got him to contact Jalal, her problem could be solved. But how was she to get in touch with him? She concentrated and recalled his phone number painted across the rear screen of his car. She repeated it and scribbled it on a piece of paper for reference. Then, at 3 in the morning, she tiptoed down to the lounge and called Salaar. Salaar was asleep when his cell phone began to beep. As the tone continued, he woke up and groped around his bedside table with considerable annoyance. "Hello," he said drowsily. Imama recognized his voice. "Hello," he said again. "Salaar, it's me, Imama," she said. He was about to say, "Imama who?" but he sat up with a jolt. Along with the name, he recognized the voice too. "I'm Wasim's sister." "I know." He switched on the lamp and reached for his watch. It was 3:10. There was silence at the other end of the line. "Hello," he said again. "Salaar, I need your help." He frowned, trying to understand. "I saved your life once and I want you to save my life now." He listened to her. "I need to contact someone in Lahore, but I can't." "Why?" "Because no one's picking up the phone." "At this time, you want?" She interrupted, "Please just hear me out. I can't call during the day and perhaps not even tomorrow night. I'm not allowed to. I want you to note this number and address and to contact Jalal. Ask him if he has spoken to his parents, and if so, what their response is, and tell him that my parents have fixed my wedding date and will not let me leave Lahore until I get married." This was interesting. Salaar sat up in bed, pulling his blanket over his knees, and listened to Imama dictating the telephone number and address. He did not write it down, he didn't need to. "And what if I get no response either?" he asked. "Then please go to Lahore and meet him." She was pleading now. "This is very important for me. If he should ask me how I come into the picture, tell him whatever you want, that doesn't interest me. I just want out of this mess. Wouldn't it be better for you to talk to him?" Salaar said. "I've told you that he's not answering the call now, and I may not get another chance to call him," she replied. Salaar was silent and she hung up, feeling hopeless. Salaar switched off his phone and tried to piece the jigsaw together. Imama Hashim, Jalal, contact, talk to parents, forced marriage. He hadn't asked Imama, but was trying to figure out her relationship with Jalal. It was interesting that a girl like Imama should be involved in such an affair, and that despite her aversion for Salaar, she should be seeking his help. What's this female trying to do? Use me or frame me? He wondered. He lay back and tried to sleep, but could not. He had known Wasim and his family for some years now and had also seen Imama fleetingly, but had never really looked at her. He really didn't know much about her. Compared to his own family, Wasim's family was quite old-fashioned, so he could not visit them as freely as he went to other friends' homes. It did not bother him as he felt that people have their own traditions, but he had some idea of Imama's moods and temperament. However, Imama's call had shocked him and he tossed about restlessly. "To hell with Imama and the rest," he muttered as he pulled his pillow over his head in an effort to get back to sleep. Imama returned to her room and sat down. She could feel knots in her stomach. Her life had been overturned in a few hours. She hadn't slept all night. She did not come out for breakfast, her appetite had vanished. Around 10:30, she heard cars start and drive out of the porch. Her father and older brother must have left for their office. She was waiting for them to leave. She emerged from her room half an hour after Hashim Mubin's departure. Her mother and sister-in-law were in the lounge. Imama reached for the phone, but her mother called out. "Your father has said that you are not to use the phone." "I'm calling S.A.W." Imama looked at her mother, who asked her why. "I want to talk to him. And tell him the same rubbish you were talking last night," her mother retorted. "I am speaking to him in your presence, let me speak. If I say anything improper, you can cut off the call." Imama's voice was steady and calm. Her composure seemed to reassure her mother. Imama dialed, but it was not S.A.W's number. The person who received the call was Jalal. A current of joy raced through Imama. "Hello, this is Imama," she said confidently, without naming S.A.W. "Why did you leave for Islamabad without telling me?" "I went to the hostel to meet you," said Jalal. "I came to Islamabad yesterday, S.A.W," she continued. S.A.W? Who are you talking to? Jalal was surprised. Baba told me last night that the wedding date has been fixed. It was as if a bolt of lightning had hit Jalal. Wedding date, he muttered, but she continued to speak calmly. I want to know if you've spoken to your parents. I do not want to marry anyone other than you, so talk to them and let me know. I could not. It suddenly dawned on Jalal that someone was around Imama. That was the reason for her calling him S.A.W. I'll talk to them. When will you call me? You tell me when. Call tomorrow. What date has been set for the wedding? There was concern in his voice. She was not aware of the schedule, but he reassured her that he would sort out the matter with his parents. Imama thanked him and said goodbye. She was relieved that neither her mother nor her sister-in-law had suspected that she was speaking to someone other than S.A.W. This wedding has been arranged by your father and Azam bro, and they're not going to postpone it for you or S.A.W, her mother said in a more relaxed tone. Mom, I'm just going down to the market, I have to get some things for myself, Imama said instead of responding to her mother. It's one thing to allow you to use the telephone, but you are not to go out of the house. Your father has warned me and the Chowkidar too not to let you out. Mom, why are you people treating me this way? I haven't refused marriage, I'm only asking to be allowed to complete my house job. Imama sat down helplessly. I fail to understand why you are delaying the wedding, the date has been brought forward but this match isn't against your will. Imama's sister-in-law tried to reason with her. The whole house has been plunged into tension since last night just because of you. You surprise me, Imama, you were never so stubborn. What's come over you? Something has happened ever since you've been to Lahore. And our wishes will make no difference, let me tell you. Your father has made up his mind, her mother added. But at least you could have tried to reason with him, protested Imama. Why? I'd have spoken up if there was something to object to, but that was not the case, her mother replied. Fuming, Imama returned to her room. Uncharacteristically for him, Salaar woke up late. When he saw the time, he decided not to go to college. His parents were away in Karachi and he was alone at home. He was watching TV when the servant brought in his breakfast. He remembered something and asked for the maidservant, Parveen, who came in shortly. I need you to do something for me, he told the middle-aged woman. Your daughter works in Wasim's house, right? What time does she go there? Salaar put down the remote control and turned his attention to her. Yes, she does, she is there now. She looked at him, a little taken aback. Why? What happened, Salaar sir? Nothing. I just want you to go there and give this phone to her. Tell her to give the phone to Imama. Salaar casually held out the cell phone. Parveen was confused. I did not understand you, sir. Give this phone to your daughter and tell her to give it to Imama without letting anyone know, he repeated firmly. But why? And what if someone gets to know? You don't need to know why, he said sharply, and people will find out only if you or your daughter opens your big mouths. And we'll be in big trouble if you do so, but if you don't then it will remain a secret and you will benefit too. Without a word, Parveen picked up the phone. Salaar warned her again. As she was about to leave, he stopped her. Taking some money from his wallet he gave it to her and she took it with a slight smile. This was a familiar situation in the homes of the rich people she worked for. She knew of the secrets their children had and keeping them hidden was a nice way of making extra money. She concluded that Salaar and Imama had something going and the cell phone was a gift. She was surprised at herself. How come she hadn't discovered this? And then Imama, wasn't she getting married? Then why was she up to this mischief? And to think that I always thought she was such a good girl. Parveen was appalled at her ignorance of this development. Dad, I want to talk to you about something. That night Jalal went to his father's room. Yes, come in. What is it? He looked up from the files he was studying. Jalal pulled up a chair and sat down, but he did not speak up. Ansar Javed, looking at his son's worried expression, realized that something was amiss. I want to get married. Jalal came to the point without any fuss. You want to what? This was hardly what he expected to hear from his son. Jalal repeated his statement. How come you took this sudden decision? Till yesterday you wanted to go abroad for specialization, he smiled. Well, the situation is such that I had no choice but to talk it over with you. His father became serious. Jalal continued with some hesitation after a pause. Have you seen Zainab's friend Imama? Yes. Are you interested in her? His father asked and Jalal nodded in agreement, but they are very wealthy people. Besides, they are not Muslims. Ansar Javed's tone had changed. Dad, they are Qadianis, but she has converted to Islam, Jalal explained. Do her parents know? His father asked, and when Jalal's answer was negative, he sharply rebuked him. Do you think they will accept this proposal? Her parents' permission is not needed. We want to go ahead without it. Ansar Javed was livid. Have you lost your mind? I cannot allow this under any circumstances. Jalal was crushed, but he persisted. I have a commitment. Did you do so with my permission? At this age people have many commitments, many interests, but that does not mean that you should ruin your life. That I know how well connected that family is. They'll ruin us if they get to know. Jalal pleaded with his father, but Ansar Javed was adamant that he would not entertain any wedding plans for his son until he had completed his specialization. When Jalal made it clear that Imama was his sole choice, he advised that she should speak to her parents in this regard. If they agreed, then Ansar Javed would give his blessings too. Dad, please try to understand her problem. She's a very nice girl and she wants to marry a Muslim, but her parents will not accept her decision. She needs our help. Jalal deliberately did not mention her engagement to S.A.W. I am not interested in others' problems, and nor should you be. You should be thinking about your future. Many people have problems and need help. Can you help them all? Besides, there's a huge difference in their status and ours. I'm not going to earn their enmity, nor am I going to lose face among my own people by bringing a non-Muslim into our family. I told you she has converted. There was annoyance in Jalal's tone. This was even before we met. Were you a witness? His father was not convinced. Even if this is true, then she should sort out her problems. Why does she want to involve you? Only if she takes her parents into confidence and they agree. Will your mother and I consider your marrying Imama? We're not going to have a runaway daughter-in-law. No amount of persuasion or argument in favor of religious sentiment could move Jalal's father. Don't drag religion into this. You're not the only Muslim who must find a solution. Be realistic. It's all very well to be aware of your moral responsibility, but you also owe it to your parents to respect their wishes. It is incumbent on you to obey us. Supposing you do marry her, what next? You'll go off abroad in 6 months or so and she'll have to stay home. I cannot afford to educate your siblings, pay for your studies abroad and for her education as well, he continued. How long will she sit home? Besides, what if her family sues us? We can be convicted and even be jailed. What becomes of your sister then? Jalal had no answers to his father. Think coolly, rationally, instead of being so emotional, his father reiterated. If her parents do not approve of you, then tell her to marry someone else. You'll come to know how damaging your decision in her favor could be. Sis, shall I do your room? The maid, knocking at the door, asked Imama. No. Go away. Imama waved her off. The maid, instead of leaving, shut the door behind her and stood before Imama. Did I not tell you to? Imama started, but choked on her words. The maid produced a cell phone from her dupatta. Imama was taken by surprise. Sis, my mother has given me this. She said that your neighbor, Salaar sir, has sent this for you. She quickly held out the phone to Imama, who snatched it. Her heart raced. Listen, you're not to tell anyone that you've brought me a phone or anything, Imama cautioned her. No, sis, don't worry, I won't tell anyone. In fact, if you want to send something for Salaar sir, you can give it to me. No, I have nothing to send. You can leave, she said, regaining her composure. Imama hastily locked the room as the maid left. With great trepidation, she took out the phone from the drawer and began dialing Jalal's number as she wanted to talk to him in detail. Jalal's mother picked up the phone. Dear, I'm afraid Jalal's not home and he'll be back at night. You could speak to Zainab. Shall I call her? No, thank you, Auntie. I'm in a bit of a rush, actually. I'll speak to Zainab later. I'd asked Jalal for some books and I wanted to find out about them. I'll call again, Imama said as she hung up. Imama did not eat that afternoon either. She was waiting for the night when Jalal would be back home and she could speak to him. In the evening, the maid informed her that there was a call from S.A.W. When she went down to the lounge, only Wasim was sitting there. She totally ignored him and moved to the phone. As she picked up the phone, she heard S.A.W.'s voice at the other end. It made her blood boil, even though she knew that her father, rather than S.A.W., was instrumental in arranging this match. S.A.W. was inquiring after her welfare. She was furious. S.A.W., why have you deceived me? What deceit, Imama? Fixing the wedding date, why didn't you speak to me? She asked, fuming. Didn't Uncle talk to you about it? He did, and I told him that I did not want to marry just now. Whatever, now it is too late, and what difference does it make if you get married now or some years later? S.A.W. responded with some indifference. S.A.W. Whether it affects you or not, it certainly makes a difference to me. I don't want to get married till I've completed my studies. And you know this very well too. Yes, I know, but in this whole affair I'm nowhere involved. Let me tell you that this whole marriage is being arranged at Uncle's insistence. You have it stopped. What are you saying, Imama? How can I have it stopped? S.A.W. exclaimed. S.A.W., please. Imama, I can't do it. Try to understand my position. Moreover, the wedding cards have been printed, both the families are preparing for the wedding and… Imama abruptly banged down the receiver. Wasim had not interfered in the whole conversation. He had quietly listened, but when Imama broke off, Wasim said, "You are quite unnecessarily making a terrible issue of the whole thing. Eventually, you'll have to marry S.A.W., then why are you creating problems for yourself? As it is, Dad is very upset with you. I did not ask for your opinion, so mind your own business. You've hurt me enough." Imama stormed back to her room. That evening too she did not leave her room, but ate the food the servant had brought her. Towards 11 o'clock, she phoned Jalal, who himself picked up the phone. Perhaps he was expecting her call. After some brief preliminaries, he came to the point. "Imama, a short while ago I spoke to Dad." Then? After a few moments, Jalal said, "Dad is not in favor of our marriage." Imama's heart sank. "But you were saying that he would have no objection." "Yes, I'd also thought so, but he has a lot of reservations. He feels that there's a lot of difference in the social status of our families, and he knows about your family, and his biggest objection is the fact that you want to marry me against your parents' wishes. As such, he is afraid that your people will create problems for us." She sat motionless with the phone to her ear, listening to Jalal. "Did you not try to make him agree?" After a long pause, Jalal said, "I tried my best. He said that if your people were willing then he would also consent, regardless of your family's faith, but without their consent our marriage is just not acceptable to him." "And what do you say?" "Imama, I'm unable to think," Jalal said plaintively. "Jalal, my parents will never agree to my marrying you. If I were to marry you, our entire community would boycott my parents and they would not be able to bear this. And then there is my engagement to S.A.W." When Jalal insisted she try again, Imama said, "I've already been slapped by my father just for disclosing that I am interested in someone else. If he should discover that you're not from the same faith as ours, he'll kill me." She begged Jalal to try again to persuade his father. Jalal relented, but he was very upset. Imama was in despair after her conversation with Jalal. She had never thought that his parents would object to their getting married. Cell phone in her hand, she sat lost in thought. "Your father has already spoken to me about this and he's absolutely right. You have no business putting yourself into peril." Jalal's mother spoke with finality when he approached her. "I can't see what's so perilous, you're needlessly anxious," he protested. Jalal, you're naive to the point of stupidity. Your father knows Imama's family and their background. What do you think, that they'll leave you alone once you get married or that they'll not hound us? Jalal persisted. We'll keep the marriage secret, no one will get to know. I'll leave for my specialization and then call Imama over after some time. I see no reason why we should take such a risk for Imama's sake. And you should know that we do not marry outside the family, there are plenty of eligible girls. Had I known your inclination, I'd have fixed you up elsewhere, she said angrily. It makes no difference that you like her, what matters is what we think, and your father and I do not like Imama or her family. He tried his best to convince his mother that she had seen Imama up close as she was Zainab's friend, that Imama had taken a major step in changing her faith and needed support and sympathy. Well then, her taking a major decision doesn't mean that she should put others in a risky situation. I respect her decision, she did the right thing, but we have our own concerns, she continued in a gentler tone. Think rationally, you have to go abroad to establish yourself professionally, set up your own hospital one day. Getting married into a good family will help you achieve your aims, you have no idea how many offers there have been for you. What can you hope to get by marrying Imama? Her family will boycott her and it'll be a social stigma for all. Have you thought of the future? What will you say when your own children question you? Jalal's mother spoke somberly and he listened without interruption or protest, impassive. It was hard to gauge from his expression if her words had had any impact. Imama called Jalal again the next night. He received the call. His words plunged her into despair when he disclosed that he'd spoken to his mother and she was more opposed to this match than his father was. When I told her about your decision, she said it was your problem, not ours. Jalal's bluntness pierced Imama. I've tried my best, Imama, but there's no way my mother will agree, Jalal conceded quietly. Can't you marry me without their approval? She asked plaintively. No, I cannot, I love them too much to hurt them, to take this step without their good wishes. She begged and pleaded with him to rescue her from this situation, to save her life, but he was firm in his reply. I cannot disobey my parents. Don't pressurize me so. Imama's nerves were shattered. She had never abased herself so. She entreated him to have the wedding secretly and said he could also then marry anyone else of his parents' choice, that she'd have no objection. Imama, stop being so childish. You should know what it'll mean if my parents get to know, they'll throw me out of the house. What are we supposed to do then? We'll work hard, we'll do something, we'll survive. Will this, something, finance my studies abroad? His tone was sharp, sarcastic. She had no answer. No, Imama, I can't sacrifice my dreams, my ambitions for you or for anyone else. I love you, yes, but I cannot display such sentimentality like you. Do not call me again because I am putting this whole affair behind me. I feel sorry for you, but you have to solve your problems yourself, I can't help you, goodbye. Jalal hung up. It was 10:50 p.m. Imama felt as if her world had gone up in smoke around her. Who knew better than her, at this moment, the agony of losing everything that was once within her grasp? Her mind was numb, her very being torn, she sat on her bed like a lifeless statue. I should tell Dad everything, what other option do I have? Perhaps, he'll throw me out, at least, I'll be free of this place. I do not want to marry S.A.W, so the question of shopping for the wedding does not arise, Imama told her mother in a determined tone. First you were opposed to the idea of getting married, now you are opposed to marrying S.A.W, what on earth do you want to do? Her mother was exasperated. I don't want to marry S.A.W. Then who do you want to marry? Hashim Mubin was standing in the door. He must have certainly heard the conversation between Imama and her mother when he was in the corridor. He could not control his temper. Imama was silent. Tell me, who is it that you want to marry? Have you lost your tongue? Why don't you want to marry S.A.W? What's your problem? Answer me. He was screaming furiously. Imama composed herself and spoke courageously. Dad, marriage is a lifetime commitment. I want to marry of my own choice. Till yesterday, S.A.W was your choice, he reminded her bitterly. That was yesterday, not today, she replied. Why not now? Tell me, why not now? He asked in a raised voice. For a few moments, Imama looked at him without a word. Then she said, Dad, I want to marry Slim. The heavens seemed to fall on Hashim Mubin. What did you say? He asked uncertainly. I do not want to marry a non-Muslim because I have changed my faith to Islam. There was absolute silence in the room for the next few minutes. Salma was in a state of shock and Hashim Mubin, he seemed to have turned into stone. He stared speechlessly at Imama, as though he had forgotten how to breathe. He had never imagined, in his wildest dreams, that he would have to face such a situation in his own home, and that too at the hands of his most loved child. His life was being sucked onto a vortex. What the hell do you mean? Rage rose up in him like a wave. You know what I mean, Dad. You know very well. You're out of your mind, he hollered. Imama shook her head silently, she knew the state of his mind. Was this why we brought you into the world, that you should, you? He searched for words. You're doing all this just so that your marriage to S.A.W should be called off, that you can marry the man of your choice. No, it's not that. It is, do you take me to be stupid? Hashim Mubin was frothing at the mouth. You can arrange my wedding with anyone you like. I have no complaint as long as he is not from your community. At least, then you cannot say that I did all this for a particular person. Her father's anger knew no bounds, just a chit of a girl and telling him what to do. What did she know? I know a lot, Dad. I'm 20 years old, I don't have to be led by you. I know that your faith has brought a great deal of prosperity to our family. She spoke with composure in a steady voice. You will not be forgiven for your sins. He admonished her. Imama felt sorry for him, he was standing in hell and warning her of its horrors. She felt sorry for the man whose eyes were blindfolded, whose heart was sealed. She felt sorry for him whose soul had been crushed, who stood at the topmost level of waywardness and error. You have been led astray, just reading a few books has. He began to say, but Imama interrupted him. You will not be able to debate with me on this issue. I know everything, I have researched and confirmed it. What can you tell me or explain? You have chosen your path and I have chosen mine. You are doing what you think is right and I do what I believe to be right. Your faith is your personal matter and mine is my personal matter. Isn't it better that you accept my decision as a conscious deliberate act rather than as an emotional step? Imama spoke with dignity and clarity, but her attitude further provoked her father. Allowing you to change your faith, do you know the repercussions? The community will boycott me and I'll be reduced to nothing. We'll be brought to the streets. No, Imama, this cannot be. You may have lost your mind but I haven't lost mine. You can follow whatever faith you wish, but you will marry S.A.W and be part of their family. Leave this house and go live with them, perhaps, you will then know what to do with your life. Hashim Mubin stormed out of the room. As soon as he left, Salma turned on Imama, seething. If I'd known what shame you were going to bring on us, I'd have strangled you at birth. You seem determined to humiliate us in public. Imama looked at her without a word. Salma went on ranting and raving, and then walked out. About an hour after Salma left, there was a knock on the door, it was S.A.W. Imama did not expect to see him here. Worry was written all across his face. Apparently, Hashim Mubin had called him over and disclosed everything to him. What's going on, Imama? Why are you doing this? He asked as he entered. S.A.W, if you've been told what I have done, then you must also know why I've done it. You do not realize what you've done, he said, pulling up a chair. One makes such decisions in a fit of sentimentality. I'm aware of my actions. Imama cut across his words. What do you mean by sentimentality? Does one change one's faith out of sentiment? I have been studying Islam for the last 4 years, and that's not a short period. You must have been swayed by others' views. You? No, I was not swayed by anyone. I discarded what I thought was wrong and took up what is right, that's all. S.A.W had no grounds for argument. He shook his head and said, "Very well, your faith is your concern, but why are you against our getting married? Let the wedding take place. You and I cannot get married. It will not be valid." S.A.W was shocked. "Why? Am I not Muslim?" When she replied in the affirmative, he blurted out, "Uncle was right, you've been brainwashed. Then why should you want to marry such a girl?" "It's better that you find someone else for yourself," she retorted. "I don't want you to ruin your life." "Ruin my life?" she laughed. "What life? The life I am living with people who have sold their souls for worldly wealth? Behave yourself. You seem to have forgotten your manners the way you speak so carelessly, saying what you like about anyone," S.A.W rebuked her. "I cannot respect a person who's leading others astray," she said curtly. "At your age, people do become confused about their identity. When you're older, you'll understand whether we're on the right path or the wrong one." S.A.W calmed down and tried to pacify her. "If you people think I'm in the wrong, then why don't you leave me alone, let me go free? Why am I a prisoner here? If you believe that your faith is true, let me find out for myself. If someone so close is bent on self-destruction, and that too a girl, we can't just leave her to destroy herself." Imama, try to understand the sensitivity of this situation. Your family and all they have is at stake because of you. Nothing is at stake because of me. Even so, why should I care? Why should I go to hell for their beliefs or cast aside my faith for their sake? S.A.W, I cannot tread this misguided path with you all, let me go where I choose. Imama's voice was firm. "And even if you force me to marry you, it will be of no use to you. I will not be your wife in the real sense. I will not be faithful to you. I'll escape whenever I get the chance. How long will you imprison me or guard me? And I'll take your children away too, you'll never see them again." She tried to paint a horrifying picture of their future. "If I were you, I'd never marry a girl like Imama Hashim. It would be a total loss, the limit of foolishness. You still have the opportunity to refuse, your future is at stake. Why don't you marry a nice girl of your community and live a happy life? Not me, I'll prove to be the worst nightmare. S.A.W, just say no to this match, tell Uncle Azam you don't want to marry me. Or go away somewhere and come back when this matter blows over. Stop giving me this silly advice, I'm not going to give you up, never. Nor am I going to pull out of this relationship or run away from home. You're the only one I will marry. Now it's a question of our family's honor and name. If you had any idea of the losses we'll have to face should this wedding be called off, you would not come up with such crazy notions. As far as being a bad wife or running away is concerned, that is a later issue. I know your temperament well, you're not inclined to harass people unnecessarily, least of all me who you love," S.A.W concluded complacently. "You're mistaken, S.A.W, I've never been in love with you and, especially since I accepted Islam, I have severed my relationship with you. You're nowhere in my life now. If I can be a problem for my family, you should know what problems will follow for you and your family, so don't fool yourself. We cannot be together, I cannot be a part of your family." She paused, and then went on. "There's a vast gulf between us, S.A.W, we're so far apart that I cannot even see you. And I will not bridge this gulf. I'm just not prepared to marry you." S.A.W's color changed as he watched and heard Imama. "Can you do me a favor?" "What do you think I've been doing all along?" asked Salaar. There was silence at the other end, then she said, "Can you go to Lahore and meet Jalal?" Salaar closed his eyes momentarily. "Why?" Imama's voice was low, heavy with tears. "To request him on my behalf, to marry me. If not forever, then temporarily. I want to leave this house and cannot do so without his help. Tell him to just have the nikah finalized. You're in touch with him on the phone, why don't you tell him yourself?" Salaar said while munching on potato crisps. "I did," she replied more tearfully. "He refused." "Very sad," said Salaar. "So it's a one-sided love affair?" "No." "Then why did he refuse? What's it to you?" She was peeved. "What is the point of my going all the way to talk to him? You can call him again. But he does not speak to me, he doesn't receive the phone nor will he take any calls at the hospital. He's pointedly avoiding me. Then why are you chasing him? Obviously, he doesn't love you. You can't understand this, just help me out. Go there and tell him about my situation, he can't do this to me. And if he should refuse to entertain me, then? You can still try, at least once. Perhaps, a way can be found out of this mess. A smile arose on Salaar's lips. He found Imama's predicament amusing. He switched off the phone and thought about her problem as he popped crisps into his mouth. He was getting more deeply involved in Imama's situation. It was the biggest adventure of his life, it seemed, first smuggling the cell phone to Imama, now contacting her boyfriend, Jalal. Imama had told Salaar in detail about Jalal's home and the hospital. He was now thinking of what he'd say to Jalal. Salaar took a good look at the man before him. He was disappointed, an ordinary face and build, and medium height. Perhaps he would have looked better without that beard. Salaar's good looks, tall frame and athletic physique made him very attractive to the opposite sex, but this person was bereft of such advantages. Salaar wondered what it was that had drawn Imama to this man. He thought she was more foolish than he believed. I am Jalal Ansar. You wanted to meet me? Salaar Sikandar. Salaar extended his hand. Sorry, I didn't recognize you. Naturally, we're meeting for the first time. Salaar had come to the hospital, looking for Jalal. With a little help, he found him and was now with him in front of the duty room. Can we sit down somewhere and talk? Asked Salaar. Talk about what? Jalal looked somewhat concerned. About Imama. Who are you? Jalal's expression changed. I'm her friend. Jalal looked at Salaar without a word and they began to walk. My car's in the parking lot, let's go there, suggested Salaar. They did not exchange a word till they reached the car. I've come from Islamabad, began Salaar. Imama wanted me to speak to you. Imama never mentioned you to me, Jalal said rather oddly. Since when do you know her? Almost since childhood, our houses are adjacent. We're very good friends. Salaar didn't know why he made the last statement. Maybe he was enjoying the spectrum of expressions crossing Jalal's face. He had noticed his look of displeasure. I've spoken to Imama in detail that I cannot see what's left to talk about after that, Jalal said in a flat tone. Imama wants you to marry her. Salaar's voice was equally expressionless, like a newsreader's. I have informed her of my decision. She wants you to review it. That's not possible. She's a prisoner in that house, in custody of her parents, her family. If you cannot commit yourself permanently, she wants you to make a temporary commitment and get her released with help from a bailiff. How can that be when she's being held captive? Queried Jalal, and Salaar said the marriage could be conducted over the telephone. No, I cannot take such a risk. I don't want to get involved in such matters. My parents will never allow this and they are not prepared to accept her anyway. Jalal's look was fixed on Salaar's ponytail. He disapproved of Salaar the way Salaar had disapproved of him. She's ready to enter a temporary arrangement, Salaar reiterated, so that she can leave her home. You can divorce her afterwards, if you wish. I think I've said clearly that I can't help her. Why don't you marry her if it's just a temporary arrangement? After all, you're her friend, aren't you? Jalal said pointedly. If you can come all the way from Islamabad to Lahore to help her, surely you can do this too. She didn't ask me to marry her, so I didn't think of it, Salaar shrugged. In any case, she loves you, not me. What's love got to do with a makeshift marriage? You can divorce her later on. Jalal suggested a solution. Thank you, I'll convey your advice to her, replied Salaar seriously. And if this is not possible, then tell Imama to find some other way out. In fact, why don't you go to a newspaper office and tell them about her predicament, how her parents are holding her against her will. When the media highlights this issue, her parents will be compelled to set her free, or you can go to the police and procure her release. Salaar was surprised. Jalal was talking sense. Why had Imama not thought of this herself? This was a safer way out. Fine, I'll convey this too. Please don't come to me again, and also tell Imama that she's not to contact me in any way in the future. As it is, my parents are planning my engagement. Jalal added this revelation. Very well, I'll tell her all that you have said, replied Salaar casually. Jalal said nothing more and stepped out of the car. If Imama had any hope that Salaar would be able to convince Jalal to marry her, it was a great mistake on her part. Salaar had no sympathy for Imama, nor had he entered this tangle out of any desire to do a good deed. It was just an adventure for him, and Imama marrying Jalal was not part of it. If he had to justify their marriage, the only justification he had was that they loved each other, but this was rejected by Jalal. Salaar could not cite religious or moral reasons to persuade Jalal because he himself was so distant from the concepts of religion and morality. Above all, why would he get into a lengthy argument for Imama's sake, with someone whom he disliked at first sight? These thoughts crossed his mind as he drove back from Lahore to Islamabad. It was curiosity that took him to Lahore in the first place. What did this guy Jalal look like? How would he react to Imama's request? He had conveyed her message verbatim, and now he was taking back Jalal's response. It was an amusing scenario for Salaar. What would Imama's reaction be? She was not going to marry S.A.W, and Jalal was not ready to marry her. She could not leave home, and there was no one else who could come to her aid, so what would she do next? Usually, girls chose to take their lives in such circumstances. Oh yes, she'll come to me asking for poison or a revolver. Suicide, very exciting, he thought, in a perverse fashion, contemplating the possibilities. After all, what else can she do? Will you marry me? By marriage, on the telephone? A shock hit Salaar, he was speechless. On returning from Lahore, he had repeated Jalal's response to Imama. He thought she would burst into tears and ask him for a weapon to end her life. Instead, she was quiet for a few moments and then sprang the question which left him stunned and silent. I need your support just for a few days so that my parents cannot force me to wed S.A.W. Then you can get me out of here with a bailiff's help. I will not need you after that, and I'll never disclose your name to my parents, Imama explained. Okay, I'll do it, but this bailiff business is tricky. There are many legalities involved, hiring a lawyer and… Imama interrupted him at the other end. You can get your friends to help you, they must be experts in doing such things. Salaar frowned with annoyance. What sort of things? These sort of things, she replied calmly. How do you know? Wasim tells me that you don't keep very good company, blurted Imama, and then there was silence. She regretted having said that. It was inappropriate. My company is very good, at least, better than Jalal's. There was sharp irony in Salaar's tone. Imama was quiet. Anyway, I'll see what I can do. But you should remember that this is a very risky course of action. I know, but it's possible that my parents may throw me out when they discover that I have married, then there'll be no need of a bailiff. Or they may accept my marriage, in which case, I'll divorce you and marry Jalal. Salaar shook his head with disbelief. He had never met anyone so stupid. This girl could be crowned the queen of folly. Anyway, let's see what can be done, he said and hung up. I want to sign a marriage contract, a marriage. Hassan stared at Salaar and burst out laughing. Is it a new adventure or your last adventure? The last adventure, Salaar replied in a serious tone. So you're going to have a wedding? Asked Hassan as he took a bite of the burger. Who's having a wedding? I just want to go through a marriage with a girl who needs help. I want to help her. Hassan looked at him intently. Are you joking? No, not at all. I didn't call you here to joke with you. Then what's this nonsense about a marriage and helping a girl? Hassan was annoyed. Are you in love or something? My foot. Am I crazy to go falling in love, and that too at this age? Salaar scoffed. That's what I was wondering, why are you doing this? Salaar spoke to Hassan in detail about Imama and her problem, but he did not tell him that she was Wasim's sister because Hassan knew Wasim quite well. However, Hassan immediately asked about the girl's identity. Salaar took a deep breath. She's Wasim's sister. What? Hassan literally jumped up. The one who studies in a medical college in Lahore? Salaar nodded in assent. You must be crazy to do such a senseless thing. You'd better tell Wasim about the whole situation. I'm asking for your help, not your advice. Salaar was upset. What can I do to help? Hassan was unsure. You arrange for a marriage contract registrar and some witnesses so that the marriage contract can be read over the phone. Salaar came to the point. How's this going to benefit you? Hassan wanted to know. In no way, but then I'm not doing this for any benefit. Damn it, Salaar. Why are you getting into this mess, and that too for Wasim's sister? Salaar cut him short. Just tell me if you'll help me or not. You need not bother about other things. Okay, I'll help you, I'm not refusing you. But you'd better think twice because this is a very dangerous step. Hassan seemed to have given up. I've thought about it. Now tell me the details. Salaar was more relaxed now. He popped some French fries into his mouth. There's one more thing, what if your parents find out? They won't, they're not here, they're in Karachi and will be there for some days. It would have been tough for me if they were here. Salaar tried to appease Hassan. They continued to munch on the fries, but Hassan's mind was somewhere else. Salaar, however, was not too concerned on that account. Hassan was not worrying about the situation, he was figuring the best strategy. Salaar had no fears about Hassan, he was Salaar's best friend. Hassan made all the arrangements very smoothly. Salaar gave him some funds and 3 witnesses were arranged for while he himself was the 4th witness. The marriage registrar had some apprehensions that something was amiss about this whole affair, but apart from a handsome fee he was also given a clear warning, and he quietly obliged. It was late afternoon when Hassan came over with the registrar and the witnesses. They all went into Salaar's room and the marriage contract papers were filled out. Salaar had already informed Imama and at the appointed time the marriage contract was read out over the telephone. Salaar sent the marriage forms over to Imama through the maidservant. As soon as she received the papers, Imama signed them swiftly and sent them back to Salaar. The maid brought them back to him, but the mystery was killing her. Who were these people in Salaar's room? What were they doing? What were these papers that Imama had signed? She had a suspicion that Salaar and Imama were getting married, but she could not control her curiosity. Handing the papers to Salaar, she put on an air of innocence and asked, Salaar, sir, what are these papers? How do they concern you? Mind your own business, he told her off sharply. And understand this very clearly that you are not to talk about this to anyone. You'd better keep your mouth shut, it's best that you do so, he warned her sternly. Why should I go about talking, sir? I was just asking you. You can rest assured, Salaar, sir, I won't breathe a word to anybody. She was petrified. As it was, Salaar had an abrupt and terse manner and she was scared to approach him. He gestured imperiously for her to leave. He did not worry about the maid telling everyone what was going on, even if she did, so what? Please meet Jalal once again, please, Imama was pleading to Salaar over the phone. Salaar was irritated by her request. Imama, he does not want to marry you, he said this so many times. Why can't you understand that there's no point in talking to him again? He said his parents wanted him to get engaged. He's lying, Imama intervened, just so that I shouldn't contact him again. His parents can't fix him up so soon. Well then, if he doesn't want to marry you, doesn't want you to contact him, then why are you wasting yourself on him? Because it is my fate to be wasted. She was crying. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, you won't understand. Just go and tell him to help me. He holds Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, in such high esteem, tell him to marry me for the Prophet's, peace be upon him, sake. She broke into sobs. Salaar was unmoved by her tears. What logic is this? Will he marry you for saying this? But Imama did not reply, she was weeping uncontrollably. Exasperated, Salaar said, either cry or talk to me. Imama hung up. Salaar called back at once but she did not receive the call. After about 20 minutes, Imama called again. I'll talk to you if you promise not to cry again, otherwise hang up, he said when he heard her voice. Instead of replying, Imama asked, "Then you'll go to Lahore?" Salaar was amazed by her determination. She was tough and she stuck to her stand. "All right, if you say so," he conceded. "Have you told your family about the marriage?" "No, not yet." She had regained her composure. "When will you tell them?" "I don't know." "When will you go to Lahore?" "Soon enough. I have some work here, or I could have left immediately." This time Salaar was lying. He had no work as such and he did not intend to go to Lahore either. "What do you plan to do once the bailiff helps you leave your house?" "I mean, where will you go, since Jalal may not be willing to help you?" He tried to distract her attention. "I'm not assuming any such thing, he will help me," Imama asserted. Salaar shrugged. "You're not ready to make any assumptions, otherwise I'd have told you that things won't turn out the way you want them to." "What will you do then?" "You'll again need your parents' help, so it's better for you to stay put. Don't get into the court and bailiff tangle because ultimately you'll come back here." "I'll never come back, under no circumstances." "That's being emotional," he observed. "You can't understand these things." Imama repeated her pet phrase. Salaar was cheesed off. "Do what you please," he said and hung up. "Your wedding with S.A.W will take place tomorrow evening." Hashim Mubin came to Imama's room that night and announced gruffly. "Dad, I will refuse. It's better that you do not force me into this marriage. If you refuse, I'll shoot you on the spot. Keep that in mind." She looked up at him. "I have been married, Dad," she announced. "This is the reason for my refusal." Hashim Mubin's expression changed. "You're lying." "I'm not lying, I got married 6 months ago." "Who did you marry?" "I can't disclose that." Hashim Mubin had never imagined that this child would be the cause of such misery. In a fit of rage, he sprang upon Imama and began to hit her left and right. She tried to cover her face with her hands but to no avail. The noise from the room drew in Wasim, who got hold of his father and pulled him away from Imama. She stood against the wall, weeping. "Dad, what are you doing? This matter can be resolved peacefully." The other family members followed Wasim into the room. "She has married someone." Hashim Mubin was in a state of anger and despair. Wasim did not accept that. "Dad, she's lying. How could she have done this when she hasn't been out of the house even once? She got married 6 months ago." Imama did not look up. Wasim could not believe she'd do such a thing, he knew too well. Imama looked at him with blurred eyes and quietly said, "It's true, I am married." "What's the proof?" "Do you have the marriage contract papers?" he asked roughly. "Not here, they're with my things in Lahore." "Dad, I'm going to Lahore tomorrow to get her stuff." "We'll see then," he declared. Imama regretted having said that. What could they find among her things? "Even if you are married, it makes no difference. I will get you divorced and then marry you off to S.A.W." Hashim Mubin spoke with finality. His face was red with fury as he walked out of her room. Gradually, all the others left too. She sat down on her bed. She knew now what a trapped bird must feel. It was a coincidence that they did not send her a copy of the marriage contract papers. Even if she had it, she could not have shown it to her father as Salaar's name was on it. It would be child's play for Hashim Mubin to get to Salaar and get rid of him. On the other hand, if they did not find the marriage contract papers in her belongings, then no one would believe her statement. Imama locked the door and called up Salaar. She told him everything. "Go to Lahore once more and tell Jalal about me. I cannot live here any longer. I have to get out of here and there's nowhere else I can go but to him. Hire a lawyer for me and tell him to file a case against my parents on my husband's behalf for unlawful confinement." "Your husband, meaning on my behalf?" "Don't give the lawyer your name. In fact, it's better if one of your friends hired a lawyer and filed the appeal. You can ask them to use any fictitious name. If my parents get to know about you, they'll get you and I don't want that to happen." Imama did not reveal the extent of her fears to Salaar and he didn't try to probe. The next day, around 11 a.m., a lawyer called up Hashim Mubin and spoke to him about Imama. the lawyer also informed him about the case being filed against him by Imama's husband. Hashim Mubin needed no further proof. Erupting with rage, he stormed into Imama's room and beat her up badly. "You'll see how you are destroyed, Imama, you'll be deprived of everything. Girls like you who gamble away their parents' honor and dignity deserve to be treated so. You have dared to take us to court when we've done so much for you, you have been thankless. Daughters like you should indeed be buried as soon as they are born." Imama endured the beating quietly. She could understand the state of her father's feelings, but she could not explain her own emotions and thoughts to him. "You have left us without a shred of honor, we cannot face anyone. You have literally buried us alive." Salma had followed her husband into the room but made no attempt to stop him. "You have destroyed our confidence," her father continued. "I wish you were not my daughter, not born in our family, or that you had died at birth, or that I had killed you with my own hands." Today, Imama did not weep at his words or at his beating, she just took the blows and accusations without a word. Hashim Mubin, exhausted, stopped hitting her, he was breathing heavily. Imama stood silent before him. "You still have time, leave everything behind. Divorce the man and marry S.A.W, we'll forgive you everything, forget it all." This was Salma speaking firmly. "I did not accept Islam to revert to the old ways. I will not return to your faith." Imama spoke softly but with determination. "Just set me free, let me leave this house. If you leave this house, the world will kick you around. You have no idea of the world outside, people are waiting like crocodiles to swallow you up. The man you have married, and insulted us, will make your life miserable. He must have married you for our money and status, but when you are turned out with nothing to your name, he'll ditch you. You will have no refuge, no shelter." Salma tried to frighten Imama by painting a grim picture. "There's time yet, Imama, you still have time." "No, Mom, I have no more time, I have made up my mind, I have told you my decision. I cannot accept this life, please let me go. If you want to cast me out from the family, do so. If you want to disinherit me, do so, I have no objections. But I will do what I have said, I have chosen a path for my life and neither you nor anyone else can change my decision. If that's the case, then just dare step out of this house, I'll kill you but I will not let you leave this house. As for that lawyer, I'll take good care of him too. If you think that any court can take you away from my custody, you are grossly mistaken. I will never let you go anywhere. I'll move you before the bailiff gets here, I'll see how you do not change your decision then. And if I do not find the man you have married, I will marry you to S.A.W, regardless of whether or not your marriage has taken place. I refuse to accept this marriage, your wedding will only be by my wishes or not at all." Saying this in a state of agitation and anger, he walked out with Salma. Imama stood silent, confused and frightened, staring at the door. The very purpose for which she had married was now disintegrating before her. She had gained nothing from it. Hashim Mubin was like a rock in his determination. "Poor Imama sis," exclaimed Parveen as she cleaned Salaar's room. Salaar was organizing the papers on his writing table, he turned around to look at her. "She got a really bad beating last night," added Parveen, noticing his attention. "Who got a beating?" Salaar asked, arranging his books. "Imama sis, who else?" Salaar stopped to look at Parveen. She continued that her daughter had informed her that Hashim Mubin had been very violent with Imama. Salaar appeared amused. "Really? Very nice." Parveen couldn't fathom his remarks, which were in English. Salaar inquired about the reason behind this episode. The maid was surprised by his reaction and his sardonic smile, she did not expect this reaction. According to her understanding of the relationship between them, Salaar should have been saddened, but the situation was quite the opposite. If poor Imama sis found out that Salaar sir was smiling at her plight, she'll die of shock, she thought. Why else would her father be so furious, she said aloud. She refused to marry S.A.W sir because she wanted to marry another boy. Parveen stressed on the last word and looked meaningfully at Salaar. "That's all," he remarked casually. "It's not an ordinary thing, sir. Their household is in an upheaval. The wedding dates have been fixed, invitations sent out, and now Imama sis is refusing stubbornly, so her father beat her up. That's no reason for such punishment, he commented. You may think so, but for them it is a very serious matter. I feel very sorry for Imama sis, such a nice, polite girl, and now she's in such a mess. Hashim sir has locked her up at home. My daughter tells me that she's in poor shape. Parveen went on about Imama's sad condition in the hope that, believing her to be a sympathizer, Salaar may reveal some secret. But he was no one's fool, and nor was he interested in Parveen's so-called sympathy. He was not concerned about Imama's hardships and punishments, but he did find it amusing that in this day and age, there were people who would raise their hand against grown-up offspring for defying them, and that two people of Hashim Mubin's status, rich, affluent. It was a revelation. Many conflicting thoughts crossed his mind. Parveen went on talking as she went about her work, but Salaar took no notice of her words, so she finally quieted down, rather disappointed. She had never seen such indifference between lovers. His reaction is so peculiar, no distress, no anxiety, even after listening to all that Imama has gone through. Perhaps she may also feel amused if he were to suffer a similar fate, Parveen wondered as she dusted a picture and put it back on the shelf. The decision to leave home was the most difficult and most painful decision of Imama's life, but she had no choice. She had no clue as to where her father would take her or how he would dissolve her marriage to get her married to S.A.W. All she knew was the reality that once Hashim Mubin took her away somewhere else, she had no way out. He would never kill her, but she preferred death to the kind of life she knew would be her fate if she stayed on. When her father left the room, Imama wept for a long time. Then, for the first time, she took stock of her life, her situation. She had to get out of the house before morning and find herself a safe place. Safe place, the question arose in her mind, and she thought of Jalal again. To her, he was the only one who could give her that security in the real sense of the word. Perhaps, if he sees me in person, he may change his mind, his attitude. Perhaps, he'll be compelled to review his decision and give me support and protection. Perhaps his parents will have pity on me. A faint hope arose in her heart. Even if his parents did not help them, at least she would be free to live her life the way she wanted to. But the question is, how am I going to get out of here and where will I go? She was agitated, and then she thought of Salaar. If she could reach his house in some way, he could help her out. She called Salaar on his phone. It was switched off. She tried several times but couldn't get through. She put down her phone, and she put some clothes and other things in a bag. She had some jewels and some money, which she also put in the bag. Then she collected all her other valuables which she could easily carry and which could fetch her ready cash. Finally, she shut her bag, changed her clothes, and prayed 2 optional prayers. Her heart was heavy and her whole being was engulfed in sadness and despair. Even her tears did not provide her relief. After offering the optional prayer, she recited Quran. Imama took the bag, switched off the light, and tiptoed out of her room. Except for one light in the lounge, all the lights were off and it was quite dark. She cautiously descended the stairs to the ground floor and made for the kitchen, where it was pitch dark. Feeling her way in the kitchen, she got to its door, which opened onto the lawn where, at the rear end, some vegetables were grown. The kitchen door was the only exit that was not locked but just bolted. The door was not locked that night also. She quietly opened it and exited. At some distance were the servants' quarters. Very cautiously, she walked across the lawn to the boundary wall separating her house from Salaar's. She quietly tossed her bag over the wall and, after some effort, managed to scale the wall and get to the other side. The sound of a knock entered the subconscious of Salaar, who was in deep sleep. This turned into a tapping, intermittent but persistent. He was lying prone, fast asleep, but the sound awakened him. He sat up in bed and, in the darkness, tried to look around. A shiver of fright raced through him. The faint tapping sound was coming from the windows. Perhaps someone was trying to open them. Salaar's first reaction was that it may be a burglar trying to get in, because these were just sliding windows and, unfortunately, there was no grill. But it was not felt necessary to provide an iron grill because the glass was high quality. imported, and could not be easily broken and, further, the windows could only be opened from the inside. Besides, the lawn surrounding the house was patrolled by 3 guards and dogs. But, in spite of these precautions, there was somebody in the small veranda on the other side of the window trying to open it. Salaar got up and moved silently towards the opposite end of the window. He lifted the curtain carefully and peeked out. He was shocked to see the figure standing outside, visible in the light of the garden lamps. "She's crazy," he said involuntarily. If their ferocious pedigreed dogs had seen her, they would rip her apart even before Salaar or anyone else got to her, and if the guards saw someone moving suspiciously, they would shoot instead of wasting time questioning the suspect. But she stood there safely. Certainly, she had jumped over the wall, Salaar thought. Teeth clenched, Salaar switched on the bedroom light. The knocking stopped. The dogs had started barking. He drew the curtain and slid the window open. "Come in quickly," he told Imama. She entered somewhat nervously, bag in hand. Salaar closed the curtains and turned to her. "For God's sake, Imama, you're insane." Saying nothing, she put the bag at her feet. "You crossed over the wall? If the dogs or the guards had seen you, you'd have been history. Your body would be lying out there. I called so many times, but your phone was switched off. I had no choice." For the first time, Salaar observed her face. Her eyes were swollen and her face drawn. She was wrapped in a wide, white hijab which, along with her clothes, had stains on it. "Can you give me a ride to Lahore?" she asked him. "At this hour?" Salaar was taken aback. "Yes, right now, I have no time." Salaar looked at the wall clock in surprise. "The lawyer had called at your house, didn't that solve your problem?" Imama shook her head. "No, they're planning to send me away somewhere. That's why I was calling you so desperately to tell the lawyer to get a bailiff and secure my release. It could not wait till the next day as they would have moved me to some unknown place." Salaar yawned. He was sleepy. "Sit down," he said as she was still standing. "If you can't take me to Lahore, then drop me off at the bus stand, I'll make my way to Lahore." He was about to tell her that they would leave in the morning, but she interrupted him. "No, not in the morning. I want to get out of here before that. If I can't catch the bus to Lahore, I'll go to some other town and take the Lahore bus from there." "At least sit down," Salaar gestured. She hesitated, then took a seat on the sofa. Salaar sat at the foot of the bed, facing her. "Where will you go in Lahore?" "To Jalal's." "But he has refused to marry you." "I'll go all the same. He loves me, he can't leave me in the lurch, and ditch me this way. I'll request him and his family, I know they'll listen to me, they'll understand my situation." "But you are now married to me." Shocked, Imama looked at him. "But that's only a paper marriage. I made it clear that the marriage was only out of necessity, it's not a real marriage." He gave her an unblinking look. "Do you know that I've been to Lahore today to meet Jalal?" Color paled from Imama's face. "Did you tell him about my problem, my circumstances?" "No," Salaar shook his head. "Why not?" "Jalal got married." He spoke casually. Imama's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him. "It's been 3 days now," he continued. "He's going to the northern areas with his bride in a couple of days. He told me all this even before I could say anything, perhaps because he didn't want to hear any more about you. His wife is a doctor too." Salaar paused. "I think his family rushed through the wedding because of your relationship with him." Salaar went on lying effortlessly. "I cannot believe this." Her voice seemed to float in from space. "Yes, I couldn't believe it either, nor I did not expect you to believe it, but it's true. You can ring him up and discuss this with him if you want to," Salaar said with apparent unconcern. Imama found herself in a dark void. That ray of hope she had followed to this stage had suddenly been extinguished. Let alone find a way out, she could not find her own being. "It's up to you now, what will you do in Lahore? He cannot marry you now, nor can his family provide you any shelter. It's better for you to return home before your family finds out." Imama felt as if his voice was coming from a great distance. She looked at him, blankly, and muttered, "Drop me off to Lahore." "You'll go to Jalal?" "No. I won't go there. But I cannot go home anymore." She suddenly stood up. Salaar looked at her with concern and took a deep breath. "Or walk me to your gate, I'll find my way. Tell your chowkidar to let me out." She picked up her bag. "Have you any idea how far the bus stand is? Can you find the way on your own in this fog and cold? When I have nothing left, then what do the cold or fog mean?" Salaar saw her smile wanly, eyes brimming with tears as she wiped them away with the back of her hand. He had no intention of going anywhere with her, let alone to Lahore. He was very sleepy and he did not like this girl who stood before him. "Wait, I'll come with you." He didn't know why or how these words were spoken. Imama saw him go towards his dressing room. He emerged a while later, having changed from his pajamas to jeans and a pullover. He picked up his key chain, watch and wallet from his bedside table. Coming to Imama, he put out his hand to take her bag. "No, thank you, I can carry it." "Let me," he said and slung it over his shoulder. They walked down in single file to the porch. Salaar put her bag on the back seat and opened the front door for her. As the car approached, the chowkidar opened the gate for them. Passing by, Salaar noticed the amazement in the man's eyes when he saw the passenger in the front seat. He must certainly wonder what she was doing in the house at this hour and how she got in. "Will you drop me at the bus stand?" asked Imama as the car approached the main road. Salaar turned to glance at her. "No. I'm taking you to Lahore." His eyes were fixed on the road ahead. End of chapter 3.